breaking right now, growing criticism of the fake news agents, as I call them, Emily Maitlis, John Sopel, and Lewis Goodall, who have decided to create a cone of silence around the Southport Massacre, the cover-up, and the sentencing of Axel Rudakubana. As Mike Graham of Talk TV posted on X, why haven't you covered the biggest story in Britain, the ghastly murders of 3 little English girls at the hands of a savage? Amazingly, the newsagents don't think the Southport killings are news. Perhaps John Sopel, Maitlis and Lewis Goodall ought to rename their loss-making podcast Not One Word. They hate Britain and its people. And William Clouston, the leader of the Social Democratic Party, added, Lewis Goodall pretends to be on the high ground here. In fact, Mike Graham makes the important point, filtering news to fit a progressive narrative is unserious journalism, if it is journalism at all, and the public is sick of it. I mean, William Clouston, this is an absolutely astonishing editorial decision, isn't it? And does it not show that Maitlis, Sopel and Goodall are actually not journalists? They are left-wing activists who want to present only one particular narrative. And if that means not covering the most important story of the year, then they just won't do it. They'll just keep talking about how awful Farage is and how terrible Trump is. They'll just ignore it altogether, like they did yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, the critics of journalists, one criticism is a sort of 3-point one, which is that journalists come in 3 sizes, activists or propagandists, stenographers and liars. It's a bit harsh, but certainly the point that Mike made, and Mike is a very experienced, slightly old-fashioned Fleet Street journalist, been around the block, he knows all about it, but he reports news. He actually talks about the news. He talks about the things that people want to know. And I don't know, I don't watch the news agents, but I have no time at all for this type of thing. I'm more concerned, these channels like the news agents or certain podcasts, they're free to say what they like. My bigger concern is the filtering that goes on in things like the BBC. They just, everything is filtered out. An important story, important things that the public are asking questions about get filtered out. And it's not so much that if you go onto the BBC website now and you read the stories, it's not so much that what they're saying is false. I'm not, usually what they're saying is factual, but it's just inane. A lot of it, the priorities they have are just wrong. And there's a certain cowardice in dealing with any of the real questions. And that's why on this particular outrage of Southport, you get back to the fact that the Deputy Prime Minister said, let's get to the facts. She knew the facts. And I wouldn't doubt that some people on social media say things that are not founded and not based in facts. But in general, a lot of the things that were said, because of the vacuum that the government left us with, a lot of the interpolations and suggestions that were made on social media actually turned out to be quite well founded, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, look, I completely agree with you, William, that it is their choice. I mean, this is an independent commercial podcast. I think the reason that it is worth pointing out is because these were the most high-profile journalists at the BBC. I mean, These were the people who used to decide what the BBC covered. And so it's a great insight, actually, to how people at the BBC think and what they consider news. And also sometimes why they consider something that is obviously news just isn't worth covering.
Yeah, but it's just it's a bit like our politics. The reason the SDP, the reason we're building the party is that people want something decent to vote for, and they want something to vote for that shares their values and has got their back. Now, if you go back to the 2016 referendum vote, Broadcasting House, BBC, I don't think there was anyone admitted to voting leave. I mean, it was a monoculture. They're not in touch with the rest of society. And actually, I think that's very dangerous. I think they don't realize how out of touch they actually are. But that, it's an endemic problem. I mean, the media classes tend to go to the same schools, certainly go to the same universities, go to the same dinner parties, and everything is filtered out. And so a lot of the things that politicians like myself would say, or like Farage would say, just considered a little bit déclassé, a little bit,
Yes.
you know, not the thing to say, really, despite the fact that it might be true. I mean, look at the work. I'll give you an example. He's not in my party, but he needs credit for this. Rupert Lowe.
Oh, he's been
He's
amazing.
gone into Parliament, and he almost single-handedly, he's had more impact than the whole of the Tory party. And what has he done? He's asking questions about disproportionality in crime and certain groups. Yes, it's a little bit edgy, but all these people, Dan, rushing around saying they want evidence-based policy, all Rupert Lowe is asking for is evidence-based policy. But it turns out the authorities don't want to give the public the evidence.
No, he's done a great job. He has done a great job. Things are changing, and I want to come to that in just a moment. But before that, though, I really wanted to get your reaction to the deranged approach from James O'Brien. Because he hosts a daily show on LBC, he clearly does have to cover this story, but the manner in which he's done so has been particularly egregious. So I'll show you this and then get your reaction off the back.
It was on Amazon that the Southport killer bought his knife. Amazon, of course, is owned by Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos was sitting in the row behind Donald Trump at the latter's inauguration. The man who owns the platform that still hosts and holds the footage that the Southport killer looked before he set off to that Taylor Swift dance class, he was not just sitting in the row directly behind Donald Trump. He is the guy that got on stage and did the Nazi salutes. So I am not given to hyperbole, but the aligning of these planets is at the very least notable. But what the hell can a British government do to rein them in? Because that is the fight that they've picked.
Yeah, no hyperbole whatsoever, right, William?
I'm glad you're chuckling, Dan, actually, on this, because actually occasionally friends, you know, myself and friends in the SDP occasionally listen to LBC when James O'Brien's on, just for a bit of amusement. And actually, to be fair, I'm unable to follow him because he's blocked me on Twitter, so I'm not really sure.
Me too.
Yeah,
He's not a pro free speech guy. We know that.
Yeah, must be doing something right. Yeah, but obviously the man can't reason properly. I mean, this is it's not even reasoning. I don't know what it is. It's the same problem as we talked about before. He's just lashing out at anything but the true cause. The true cause is the evil person that did it and the ideology that contributed to it. Let's focus on that. Be honest, instead of all this deflection. So yeah, I mean, he's I don't know. He's a complete lost cause, isn't he, James O'Brien? And it's actually comical now. It becomes. It's almost as if, you know, does he know? I suspect actually he doesn't. I don't think he's got very much self-awareness.
No, because they don't understand that the world is changing, given that they live in such a confined world. And we know what it's confined to. It's confined to a very particular part of London, a very particular part of the media class. They socialise with the same people, largely from Westminster. So they are absolutely existing in a bubble, which is why things are going to surprise them, because the change and the pace of change, and I do want to get to the SDP's role in this in just a moment, but it is becoming quite sensational, actually. And I think it's illustrated well by this speech from Javier Milei at the World Economic Forum this week. So he went into the lion's den, just like Donald Trump, and he spat so many home truths about the disgusting state of the United Kingdom in just 70 seconds that I hope it is starting to wake up the world. It is really an incredible speech. It is translated, but it's still worth listening to. Watch.
We speak in the UK, citizens are being imprisoned. Is it not true that right now, as we speak in the UK, citizens are being imprisoned for exposing horrifying crimes committed by Muslim migrants, crimes that the government seeks to conceal? Or didn't the bureaucrats in Brussels suspend Romania's elections simply because they didn't like the party that had won? Faced with each of these discussions, wokeism's first strategy is to discredit those of us who challenge these things, first by labeling us and then by silencing us. If you're white, you must be a racist. If you're a man, you must be a misogynist or part of the patriarchy. If you're rich, you must be a cruel capitalist. If you're heterosexual, you must be heteronormative, homophobic, or transphobic. For every challenge, they have a label, and then they try to suppress you by force or through legal means. Because beneath the rhetoric of diversity, democracy, and tolerance that they so often preach, what truly lies is their blatant desire to eliminate dissent, criticism, and ultimately freedom, so they can continue to uphold a model in which they're the main beneficiary.
And the thing is, William, I believe the politics of Milei and Trump are where the world is heading. And the UK and the despicable actions of Slippery Starmer and this socialist Labour government are so out of step with the rest of the world. But first, the reason you're watching this show is because you know that these days, and we've been discussing it lots at the moment, it's impossible to trust the mainstream media or the so-called fact checkers who claim to patrol social media. And that's for a very good reason, given the Brexit debate, COVID debacle, and demonisation of Donald Trump. But I've got the solution for you. Today's sponsor, Ground News, created by a former NASA engineer to provide you with the only safe way to consume the headlines, is going to solve so many of these issues. Go to ground.news/outspoken to check it out for yourself, by the way. But I want to show you this incredible website and app in action. So let's take the recent story we've discussed at lots of Outspoken of Elon Musk's fallout with Nigel Farage over Tommy Robinson, which the left-wing legacy media tried to whip up to destroy all three men, actually. And by looking at Ground News, you can see very clearly that it's collated the 230 sources on this story in one place. But what Ground News instantly shows is how the story is being covered by the media and broken down by whether those media organizations lean to the left or right, illustrated by its biased distribution service, which features on all stories. Then you can scroll down and actually see every article about the topic broken down by the political position or ownership of the publication. So in this case, it shows quite clearly that Fox News gave a fair analysis compared to Mediaite and The Independent, which did not, lambasting the men as morons with big egos without actually looking into why this split happened and how it can be resolved. What's more, Ground News gets to know you personally, providing you with the news stories you're interested in, while also analysing your own biases and coming up with potential blind spots you might not be hearing about because of your media consumption. And look, I know you love the news, that's why you're watching Outspoken, but you don't trust the legacy media. But what Ground News does is give you the tools to understand the truth about what is going on in the world. It is the only way I read the news now, allowing you to see through media bias and manipulative narratives with no more relying on the MSM to define what's really going on for you. So go to ground.news/outspoken to check it out. You can subscribe through my link today for 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use for unlimited access. And I should say, by the way, Ground News is a really great organization. It is subscriber funded, and by supporting my sponsors like Ground News, you also support my work too. And for less than a Netflix subscription, you can get all the world's news in one place and think for yourself. It really has been a game changer for a news junkie like me. So let me just repeat the address. It is linked in the show notes below, or you can click on the QR code if you're watching on screen. But the address, ground.news/outspoken.
I think there's something in that as a very broad description. And I think it's good that Milei went along there and said that in person. And I think it's good that Trump recorded a message and said a few things about trade, which I think were perceptive and timely. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I think we have a slightly different politics. We have slightly different needs. I think there are weaknesses in Milei's approach. I mean, what Milei is doing may be appropriate for Argentina on the economics. I'm not sure it is for us here. And likewise, I think the Trump's new administration, what they intend to practice, a lot of very good things. I mean, trying to kick back against divisive woke stuff, or harebrained ideology on DEI and stuff. All that's good. I think I've said for many years, actually, Dan, that on the question of basics, like having a border, like controlling who comes into your country, I think the West is in very, very serious trouble. I think Australia has a measure of control, and largely down to John Howard winning an election on it, and its geography and so on. It has control, but a lot of Western countries don't. And I've said for a long time that we need one Western country to step up and assert the border, grow some and sort of, have the self-assertion to get the border back, control who comes in. And I wanted that to be Brexit Britain, but the political class lacked the courage to do it, didn't really want to do it. But it may turn out to be the United States. And if that happens, I'd applaud that. I think that's very good. You need a state to prove you can do it. You need a state to prove that people that are here illegally shouldn't be and must be removed. And those are basics, I would say. But it shouldn't surprise anyone watching this that I don't share all of the economics. Certainly Malay's economics I don't share. And the Trump thing on economics is very interesting, because I think the skepticism of globalist free trade, very good. I'm with him on that. You need to reindustrialize. The indifference to what is made where and by whom, I share. But there is a schism, isn't there, Dan, between the sort of MAGA element in Trump's coalition and even people like Musk, who would have a much more liberal attitude towards visas for tech workers, and people like Steve Bannon want him to train Americans, and I'm with Steve on that. So broadly, yes, I agree with you. But there are if you go beneath it, it's a little bit more complicated, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and you summed it up, I think, the situation quite well in two of your posts on X recently, which I'll just go through, and then you can elaborate a little bit more. But sure. You said, similar to the point you've just made, I guess, I've always thought that one Western state would break from the pack, reinstate its borders and self-respect, and act as a beacon to the rest. It could have been Brexit Britain, but our ruling class was too weak. It's the USA. And then speaking specifically about this Labour government, you say Starmer pledges a fundamental change in how Britain protects its citizens and its children, but has the pernickety mindset of the second-rate lawyer. He can't see the danger of thousands of fighting-age males illegally entering our country. He defends their right to do so. Foolish man. And that's what's interesting to me about the SDP, because, of course, in a lot of ways, William, you would be considered to certainly be, I guess, part of the old left economically, but you have this very, very strong belief that the protection of our borders and the need for sovereignty is at the heart of what a democracy should be.
Totally. In fact, I don't think you can protect your citizens unless you do. And I think, I don't think, it's very interesting, people talk about left and right, and I don't think I have any views that wouldn't have been shared by some very traditional people on the left, like Peter Shaw and George Brown, and even Clem Attlee, actually. To them, what's happened would be unthinkable. You just let people wander in. Are you insane? Are you mad? And on things like labour markets, I mean, we had 122 candidates at the last election, and one of the things on every single leaflet was end mass immigration. I think mass immigration is absolutely insane. And from a left-wing point of view, from a worker's point of view, from a sort of workers' pay and conditions point of view, it is totally against their interests. I'm making this argument from the left. Open labour markets will have two fundamental effects. They'll suppress wages, and they'll disincentivize training. Why bother training anyone in Britain if you can just ship people in? And that's the liberalism, the economic liberalism that I'm arguing against. And it's shared by the Lib Dems, the Tories, and the Labour Party.
The Uni Party, which has to be smashed. Yeah. So I've got two specific questions for you then in terms of the SDP. Firstly, would you consider some sort of deal or some sort of electoral pact or some sort of merger with Nigel Farage and Reform UK?
Well, on the question of a deal, the answer is yes, because I'm the only person in the world that has ever negotiated a general election pact with Reform. We had one at the last election, and it was 18 seats. I negotiated it with Richard Tice, and Paul Oughton, and they honoured it. And we, in fact, one of the reasons we did it when we scoped it was that we negotiated it, and for about 12 months, it never leaked. We trusted each other, and so it worked. It was very small in scale, though, Dan. It was only 6 each to no stand, and then South Yorkshire together. So it was about 20 odd seats in total, small. But in principle, yeah, I'm against these. I want the two-party monopoly smashed. It's dreadful for the country, and it doesn't allow us to have people in Parliament that think normal things, right? That's the trouble. Parliament does not look like the British public, and doesn't reflect British opinion. So I want to smash it. I want it gone, and I would work with anyone pretty much who shares that aim. And if you believe in PR, you've got to, haven't you?
Yes, I think you do. But then my next question is in regards to Tommy Robinson, because Nigel has made it absolutely clear that he doesn't want any type of arrangement or association, which has obviously led to this big battle between Farage and Elon Musk, with Elon actually withdrawing his support for Farage's leadership. Some people say he's leaning towards supporting Rupert Lowe, who he has certainly elevated a lot on his X platform. Where do you stand on the whole Tommy Robinson question?
Well, he's got a right to his opinion, and he's raised very, very important topics. I asked the SDP's HQ to do a report on Robinson because I wanted to know about it. And after reading the report, it's pretty clear that a Democratic politician like myself wouldn't be doing anything with him. He's been convicted a number of times for a number of different things. And I don't believe that whatever he's doing is part of democratic politics and trying to get votes and trying to represent people's views in elections. That's what I'm trying to do. So I'd always defend his right to draw important topics to the public's attention and all the rest of it. But I don't think it's a category difference. I mean, what I'm interested in doing, the currency of my enterprise is votes. I want to get votes from people. And I don't think he has anything to offer at all. And I wouldn't welcome the association, actually, in that respect.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source, and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.